Good morning, viewers. Have a brief update for you based on an email that I received from the FAA recently, trying to clarify their position as to why Starship has been delayed for so long. This is going to be a brief bulletin, but I'm glad that we did receive this information because it does make the situation a little less severe. At least I hope that's the case. Here's the reasons that the FAA says that they've had to delay Flight 5. Quote, SpaceX's current license authorizing the Starship Flight 4 launch also allows for multiple flights of the same vehicle configuration and mission profile, meaning that if they just wanted to redo Flight 4 all over again, they could do that without any problems. SpaceX chose to modify both for its proposed Starship Flight 5 launch, which triggered a more in-depth review. In addition, SpaceX submitted new information in mid-August detailing how the environmental impact of Flight 5 will cover a larger area than previously reviewed. This requires the FAA to consult with other agencies. So apparently, modifications or more information was released as recently as 3 or 4 weeks ago from SpaceX, revealing that the environmental impact would be different. We don't know how different, but different than what they originally said to the FAA with the original license application. Now, this may seem quite petty, and SpaceX actually describes it as being quite petty because of the hot stage ring splashing down in a different location. That seems pretty minor. That apparently triggered a 60-day consultation with the National Marine Fisheries Service, and also because the sonic boom of the Super Heavy booster while it was attempting to land would be a little bit larger than originally thought. At least that's the interpretation that I'm getting off of their statement. That triggered a 60-day consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which again seems pretty extreme. But once again, we're only getting the information from SpaceX as to what specific environmental concerns the FAA might have about Flight 5 versus Flight 4. And I've brought up some potential consequences that Flight 5 could have that SpaceX hasn't really gotten into, especially if we're talking about the catch maneuver. If the booster were to explode over the beach, for example, catch fire during descent, have an engine explode, which created an RUD while it was over the beach, this could definitely have a substantial environmental impact outside of SpaceX's property, and it could theoretically put debris into these extremely sensitive and protected areas that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is so concerned about. Why do I think an RUD could happen during the descent? Because we saw evidence of something like this possibly happening during Flight 4, and I've talked about this a number of times. Let's compare the clip that I showed you at the beginning of the video of Super Heavy's descent versus what we saw during the actual flight. I think you might find it rather interesting. Now, so far, this is the only footage that SpaceX has released of the landing process, although they definitely have other footage from other perspectives of the Super Heavy settling down in the ocean. Everything looks okay there, but then they cut away. Now, we're also going to look at a recap of the landing in a more comprehensive recap. We get to see things from the booster's perspective briefly, and we also get to see things from the boys' perspective, and of course we get to see some cheering crowds as well. But once again, it appears that the booster sets down quite peacefully without any sort of significant issues, no fires, no explosions, etc. But let's look at how the original footage appeared during the flight. Now, SpaceX never really tried to hide the fact that they lost a second Raptor engine during this flight, and it was a rather explosive loss of an engine given the debris that we see zooming past the Super Heavy booster during this landing attempt. I just find it strange that SpaceX removed that particular bit of footage off of all of their recaps. Not only did they remove that, they're also going to remove this brief gout of flame that you're you're going to see appearing at the base of the booster after it appears to settle down in the water, right there. So yeah, my question is, why is this fire removed from all of their recaps? Do you need more proof that that happened? Well, let's go ahead and narrow this down a little bit more. So here's the flame that we see at the end of the Super Heavy landing in the original footage. And there's the recap. And by the way, I have asked the FAA more than once as to whether or not there was a fire or if there's any sort of RUD event that took place at the end of the landing, and the FAA has stonewalled me the entire time. I also submitted a Freedom of Information Act request, and then they told me I sent it to the wrong department, so I'm going to resend that request to the right department today, and hopefully I'm going to get a response within the next 20 days or so, which, given the delay that we have for Flight 5, is going to be plenty of time to hopefully get the truth. And I really wish that SpaceX would just shut me up by showing us the entire landing sequence. Just show us everything that happened during the landing. Show us that the booster wasn't on fire, and I'll shut up and I'll issue a retraction. But unfortunately, we're not getting any of that from SpaceX, and that always makes me suspicious. So that being the case, we can't be absolutely certain as to what specific environmental concerns the FAA might have about the Flight 5 configuration, which is going to take this Super Heavy booster back over the beach. What goes out over the ocean must come back over the beach eventually on its way to a capture maneuver. If it were to explode at that point, as I said before, it's obviously going to put debris in places where nobody really wants it. And so the FAA statement that was sent to me via email, it was unfortunately a couple of days ago, so I am getting this to you rather late. I apologize for that, but it ends by saying, quote, SpaceX must meet all safety, environmental, and other licensing requirements prior to FAA launch authorization. A final license determination for Starship Flight 5 is not expected before late November 2024. Once again, everything that I learned about the FAA during my visit to Washington, D.C., during my visit to their conference where they were discussing the future of commercial spaceflight, I saw nothing to suggest that the FAA is going to needlessly delay flights for petty reasons. There has to be something else going on, in my opinion, and all I can do is speculate right now because we aren't getting any specific information from the FAA as to what exactly their concerns are. And to be fair, they are not free to share all of those details, because if they did so, they would be sharing all of the details as to what's going on with Starship, details that I think SpaceX wants to keep to themselves, and the FAA is largely cooperating with SpaceX on this. Again, indicating that overall, I think this organization is willing to cooperate with SpaceX. It just could be that there's a lot more magnifying glasses on all of this right now, especially also given the Clean Water Act nonsense that's going on. Fortunately, that doesn't seem to have anything to do with the delay, thank God. So just to clarify there, we seem to be all right on that count, but nevertheless, I wish we had more information on this. And even though I finally decided to stop talking about mercury testing and things like that, I guarantee you that if this stuff is not completely cleared up by some organization other than SpaceX, if we don't get a solid clarification from the government on all of this reporting that's been going on about water testing, I guarantee you that's the only thing that people are going to be talking about in these public meetings when they are finally rescheduled. We need to get some leadership and some action from the government in order to diffuse this problem, if this is all much ado about nothing. Thank you very much for watching. I would like to thank Morgan for becoming my latest Patreon supporter. Thank you so much for your help. If you would like to join Morgan and aid me in my trip that's coming up here in just a week to go to Cape Canaveral to cover the very exciting Crew 9 launch up to the ISS, well, All the details are in the description. Please like, please subscribe, and as always, stay angry about space.